Yaakov returns after being away for 36 years. He comes back to Canaan. And a number of things happen on the return, which we read about last week. He realizes his brother, who vowed to kill him, although so many years have passed, he hasn't forgotten what Yaakov had taken from him, the birthright, and he's come against him with 400 men. Yaakov prays to God to protect him. Yaakov sends him a very valuable gift, herds and flocks, sheep, cattle, camels. They meet, and somehow he touches Esav's emotion, and they embrace, and he diffuses the whole situation. Yaakov continues, finally comes to Canaan, purchases a piece of property. The location was called Shechem. His daughter goes out just to see the type of women are there. She's noticed by the prince, and she's raped. Could you imagine? The daughter of Yaakov is raped by a heathen. And Yaakov is pained tremendously. And the rapist, who's a prince, sends his father to negotiate for the hand of Dinah to marry her. So they go and they use a subterfuge. Yaakov's children, they say to him, you people are not circumcised, we're circumcised. For you to marry into our families, you have to have circumcised your whole community. Otherwise, it's not going to happen. So Shem speaks to his father, who is the so-called the chief prince, the sheik. He convinces all the males of the community to circumcise themselves. And this was not part of Yaakov's plan now. Shimon and Levi, the second and third sons of Yaakov, go and they avenge the rape of their sister. And they kill all the males of the community on the third day of their recovery, which is the most difficult day of recovery, when they were infirm, and they killed Shem, the rapist, and his father. And they retrieved Dinah from the palace of the prince who raped her, because he held her until then. Yaakov is upset with his children for doing what they did. They did not consult with him, and it was due to their anger. And he says, why did you do what you did? Do you realize we're surrounded by all these nations of Canaan? And now we may be under attack, and we're a handful of people. And we're going to have to resort to miracles to be able to survive this. And of course, there was a miracle. But Yaakov had a problem. Yaakov's life was disrupted. Here he just underwent 20 years with his father-in-law, who was a monster. He's being confronted with his son Esav, where he may destroy his family. He finally comes, he purchased the land, his daughter's raped. And then afterwards, his two sons destroy a community, and their existence is in jeopardy because they may be destroyed by all the surrounding nations of Canaan. He's been through quite a bit. So-called from the age of 63, he's on the run, Yaakov. Yaakov now feels he wants a little bit of a respite. God should give him some time to rest, to have a break from all this overwhelming level of tragedy, of trauma. So now, all of a sudden, what happens? There's strife between Yosef, who's his most special son, and his other sons. And it reaches to a level of contentious relationship, which we'll discuss in detail, that they want to kill him. Because they believe that Yosef, the favorite son, who's next to the youngest son of Yaakov, is trying to undermine their relationship with their father, and ultimately He wants their father to curse them and ultimately destroy them. Therefore, they saw Yosef as the enemy. And anything Yosef did, they interpreted negatively. So yeah, now, but why did God allow this to happen? All this level of misunderstanding between his sons. So Rashi cites the Midrash because Yaakov bikesh leishim b'shalva, because Yaakov wanted to have this respite. He said, look, I've been through enough. Just let me be for a while. Let me breathe and relax for a while. God says to Yaakov, I mean, it's not enough for tzaddikim. They have all this unlimited reward waiting for them in the world to come. You want respite in this world? So because of this perspective that he's deserving of respite, or he wants respite, despite the fact that he has this unlimited reward waiting for him in the world to come, that was the cause of now of this contentious relationship between Yosef, his most favorite child, and the other sons. The question is, why did Yaakov want respite? He wanted to go out to play golf. He wanted to tour the world. Yaakov wanted respite that he should be able to fully focus on the spirituality to secure the future of the Jewish people. It was purely for the sake of God. It's true, he's been through plenty. But factually, you take it as it comes. What do you mean he's saying, I've had enough? Give me a break. So it's not enough what the tzaddikim have waiting for them in the world to come. This unlimited reward, you want respite in this world. So the obvious question is, what did Yaakov, why is his position so unacceptable? It's legitimate. I want to be fully focused on my spirituality, no distraction, to be able to be fully immersed and involved in what I should be doing rather than being distracted with all these other issues. Now, we find that Yaakov, when he fled from his brother, his parents gave him tremendous wealth. Because Rivka, being the brother of Lavan, understood that with her brother, unless you come with one great wealth, Lavan doesn't give away ice in the winter. Lavan is a person who's conniving, a person of guile, a person you can't trust on any level. So if you're going to find a wife, you have to negotiate with great wealth. You close the deal, you negotiate the hand of your wife and leave. If you come impoverished with just your walking stick and the shirt on your back, it's questionable whether you're going to leave that community alive, but definitely spiritually destroyed. Therefore, his parents gave him tremendous wealth. As Avram had given tremendous wealth to Eliezer to negotiate the hand of Rivka when Eliezer went to find the wife, the future matriarch, on behalf of Yitzchak. What happened to the wealth? So we discussed it. Esav had sent Eliphaz, his son, after Yaakov to kill Yaakov. So Yaakov says to his nephew, why do you want to kill me? Because your father said, I should kill you, you should kill me. But you realize, but it's murder. He says, yeah, it's true. But I have an obligation to honor my father. And if my father said to kill you, I must kill you. So Yaakov says, but you also learned from your grandfather that a person is impoverished, he's like a dead man. Take all my wealth, and as a result of that, you fulfill the wishes of your father. Because now my value has been devalued to nothing, I have no value any longer. So I'm the equivalent of a person non-existent. So you killed me. Eliphaz was satisfied, took all the wealth. Now Yaakov arrives in the home of his uncle, his future father-in-law, with nothing. And he worked 14 hard years for those two wives. He worked an additional 6 years where she was cheated 100 times. And that he left with what he left with was only due to God's protection. And when he left, he was pursued and chased. And Lavan wanted to kill him, to destroy him and his family. It was only due to God's intervention, he was not killed. He was through plenty. The Torah tells us that when he worked for the hand of Rachel, which initially he was supposed to marry the first wife, although his father fooled him and put Leah under the chuppah rather than Rachel, and he had to work an additional 7 years for Rachel, it says the 7 years he worked were like a few days. Time passed very quickly. Because he knew that Rachel is the future matriarch. Yaakov, when he arrived in the home of Lavan, he was 77 years old. That's how old he was. He worked 7 years for the hand of Rachel. That means he's 84 years old. When he stood under the chuppah for the first time, he's 84 years old. And he believed he would be marrying the matriarch, that through her he was meant to establish Jewish people. Lo and behold, morning comes, he realizes it wasn't Rachel, it was Leah. His father fooled him. So father said, no problem. You want Rachel? Work another 7 years. Yaakov worked another 7 years, 14 years for these two wives, with the same level of dedication. And time passed very quickly. Working for such an employer, such a monster, where he cheats you every step of the way. And in the nights, you freeze. In the day, you actually scorched by the sun. We're talking about you're out in the desert, smashing stones. How could that be a few days? You're suffering continuously. The price you're paying for these wives. Something you want so badly, time drags on. You wish the time passed yesterday. But yet the Torah testifies factually, Yaakov's, these years past, it's like a few days. How do we even relate to it? How's it a few days? So we explained, and I always speak people's language. You have a piece of real estate. The value is $5 billion. Somebody comes to you and says, you see this $5 billion piece of real estate? I'll give it to you for $50 million. When the person hears that, and the person does his due diligence, it's worth $5 billion, and he can get it for $50 million. $50 million, this man never had more than $100,000 in his account. But if there's any way this man could accumulate $50 million to get investors, he's going to put together that $50 million because he understands the value, what he's able to get for that $50 million, $5 billion. So he works day and night, and he succeeds. All the effort that he put together to accumulate that 50 million versus the profit return. What was it? It's nothing. Understanding the value of return, what I'm getting for this effort, look what I'm getting. I'm getting a mega return, beyond mega return, an unheard of return. It's considered effortless in terms of what I'm getting back. All the effort, what I put in is effortless compared to the reality of what I'm getting back for that accumulation of money. Yaakov understood the objective of creation is there should be a Jewish people. The Jewish people could only be from him and from his wife, who's the matriarch. Whatever he has to pay to achieve this goal, that Rachel should be his wife, it's a pittance. It's paying crumbs for infinite amounts of money. Therefore, it was Yom HaChodim. It was nothing. Even though he's connived and he's cheated, and he has to work another 7 years for Rachel. Rachel is worth it all. Because having Rachel means I could establish the Jewish people to meet the objective of creation, which is eternity beyond, which is unfathomable. That's the return. Therefore, the whole thing was Yom HaChodim. But I was cheated. With all the cheating and all the deception, it's worth it beyond one's imagination what it's worth. Of course, he has the matriarchs. And through the matriarchs, he established the Jewish people. Therefore, if you understand what it is, it's like a few days. It's nothing. I'll give you an example, a havdil. Person goes to medical school because he wants to help humanity, does it for the altruistic reasons, for the right reason, not to make money. And he has to work really hard, study hard. He has to achieve certain levels of, He has to make certain averages, this and that, and he succeeds. But he worked during those years of medical schools and internship and whatever he was, barely slept. He denied himself every comfort of life. But he's the top doctor in the world. And he has a discovery. He discovers many things for many illnesses, many diseases. The person says, you know something? Understanding the value of my education, whatever I was denied, it was like nothing. Understanding what my potential was, and he understood the potential, it's all meaningless. Because if I'm able to achieve that, whatever effort I invest, it's a pittance, it's nothing. As a result of the level of accomplishment. Okay? We got that straight. We read in Pirkei Avos, Schar B'Al Maleka, that the innate value of even the most simple mitzvah, you cannot be compensated in this world. That's the innate value of even the most simple mitzvah. So as much reward you would get in this world, you'll be shortchanged. Therefore, the main reward is the world to come. So whatever, if you relate and understand, whatever you do, whatever effort you make to do any mitzvah, you have to go to work. And they say, you know, you come in 5 minutes a day, we pay you $5 million. And if you get stuck in traffic, which is more difficult, we add another 5. That means you get 10 million by the end of the day. Does the person even think for a moment, you know, I had to get up early to get here in time, to put in those 5 minutes. I wish I'd be stuck in traffic because I get another 5 million. In terms of return, what is my investment? I invested nothing. And the employer provided the car with a driver, with a library that I could study in the car, not to even think about being stuck in traffic. What is that? You know, but I'd like a respite. I'd like to stay home and get the $20 million sitting at home. The answer is it doesn't work that way. Because if you appreciate what $20 million is, you wouldn't even consider being bothered or making effort, because that effort relative to what the return is, it's nothing. Yaakov says, I've been through what 99.9% of people have never been through. 36 years being away from home, being under the dominance of Lavan, an evil man, being confronted with a brother who wants to kill me, his daughter being raped, his kids destroying a community, being in a position of being wiped out because he's surrounded by all the nations. He says, God, I'd like to have a respite. What do you need a respite for? What do you need a respite for? If you would process this properly, understand what's waiting for you, understanding what you've done relative to the return, you did nothing. Knowing that you don't need a respite. So that he wanted a respite is a reflection that he doesn't fully appreciate what's waiting for him in the world to come. God says, no. You have to understand, because you see that your challenges are actually wearing on you, I will give you something which is truly wearing on you. What is that? The contentious relationship between your most favorite child with your other children, which you're going to be pained by that. And that's pain. But that's the meter connect, and that's the measure for measure. Because you did not appreciate and you didn't process it right, and you saw it in the negative, although you understood the reward is great, but you should have processed it differently. And because you did not, now you can understand measure for measure. You can have other challenges and you'll succeed, but the challenges are going to be painful challenges. His most beloved son disappears for 22 years due to the strife which goes on between Yosef and his other brothers, which they misunderstood, that each understood the other, which ultimately led to a point they wanted to actually kill him. But they chose to sell him into slavery. And ultimately, that was the greatest blessing because he became the viceroy of Egypt. And he provided all the amenities to guarantee the survival of the Jewish people when they were in bondage for that 210-year period. We're going to explain why Yaakov, he wanted to have some level of tranquility. He wanted to have a respite. So Hashem says, it's not enough. That's what's waiting you in the world to come, which is unlimited value. You want respite. So the question is, why not? So we explained. Because if Yaakov would have really internalized fully the value of that, he wouldn't have seen any of this as something being a negative experience. Now, we find Yaakov went to Egypt. He was 130 years old. When he found out Yosef was alive, he arrives in Egypt, he's 130 years old. So what does Yosef, the viceroy, do? He wants to introduce his father to the king. Yaakov comes to Paro, and Paro looks at him, and Yaakov was only 130 years old, and he says, I've never seen such an aged person in my life. I've seen a lot of people, but a person that's as old as you are, I've never seen a person as old as you are. So Yaakov responds by saying, I'm not really that old. I prematurely aged. Why? Because my father lived many more years than I did. My grandfather, even more than my father, till 180. My grandfather till 175. I'm only prematurely aged. Why? Because I went through a lot in my life. Because of the hardships in my life, I prematurely aged. Yaakov was meant to live till 180. God says to Yaakov, there's a medrash. This heathen Pharaoh, this pagan Pharaoh, you're coming and you're complaining and sharing your feelings of negativity of what kind of hard life you had with this heathen Pharaoh. He says, don't you realize what I did for you? You could have been killed by Esav. You could have not survived Lavan. All the wealth you have was only due to I intervened and you have the wealth. Dinah, although she was raped, she wasn't killed. And you got her back. Shimon and Levi, your two sons, when they destroyed the community, they could have been killed. If you would have seen all this in the positive light, what are you sharing? Bad news, your negative experience with this heathen. So therefore, every word that you shared with this heathen, 1 year of your life will be taken off, will be deducted. And if you count up the words, 33 words he shared with Pharaoh. So for each word he had shared with him, he had 1 year taken off his life, and that's why Yaakov will leave till 147, rather than 180. So there's a question which is asked by Rav Chaim Shmulevitz. If you count up the words, they're less than 33 words. So if that's the case, he should have lived more than 147. So Rav Chaim Shmulevitz says something phenomenal. When Pharaoh first saw Yaakov, he says, I've never seen such an old man in my life. When he said that, if a person goes and he doesn't have a bad day in his life, you look like a specimen of health. You're robust, energetic. The question is, why did Yaakov look worn down? That he looked worn down is because he did not process what happened. If he would have processed it as a gift continuously, he wouldn't have looked worn down. It's only because he processed it as suffering, therefore he prematurely aged. So prematurely aged itself was a claim against Yaakov. When Paro said you look premature, you look old, based on if he would have processed it, internalized it properly, he wouldn't have aged prematurely. It's only due that he didn't process it right. Therefore, even the parents was a claim against him. So when Paro said you look, I've never seen a man as old as you are, those words are included within the 33 words. Tell you something which is a little bit it's a joke, but it happened. I once said to a person, if you win the lottery, the government takes 50% of it in taxes. So if you win $500 million, you pay quite a bit of tax. So the person says, I don't think I'd want to win the lottery because I would not want to pay that kind of tax to the government. Got it. You prefer to have nothing than have a major part of the pie because you got to give a third of it to the government. You understand what this is all about? You're already worried about, you're going to have to pay the accountant to work out the numbers, to make sure to set up a trust for you that you shouldn't have to pay less tax. That's what you're worried about. But if you understand the value of winning the lottery, everything else totally doesn't exist. Those issues are not issues. If they're issues, you got a problem. You understand? If you appreciate fully what happened and what you experienced, and you come out on top, of course you sing God's praises. But why did you experience trauma all along? Every step of the way was what? Was ecstasy. Like he experienced initially the 7 years, hard years he worked for Lovim. It was like a few days. Because understanding that you're working for the matriarch, as hard as you work, that's not called working hard. I once said something, the blessing that you say on before you study Torah, and it's an unusual blessing. Of course, you say a blessing like you say on any mitzvah. But then we make a supplication. Allow the Torah to be pleasant in our mouths and the mouths of our descendants and our grandchildren. The Torah should be sweet and pleasant. Why are we asking for that? You want to know why? The Midrash tells us to become a great Talmud Chacham, a great Torah sage. It takes endless years of immersion, dedication, and you have to give up many things for it. Let's say it would be considered tough and it's a dread, and you don't taste the sweetness of it. You know what happens? It's pushing a boulder up a mountain. So we ask Hashem, despite the difficulties, despite the sacrifice, every moment of that sacrifice, let it be sweetness. We should experience as something pleasant and sweet. This is to counter reality that it's difficult. And if you experience in that context, it's not difficult. Every time you come upon a new insight, you sing God's praises. This is unbelievable. There's nothing compared to this. That's what we ask Hashem. Allow the Torah to be sweet and pleasant in our mouths and the mouths of our children. As a result of that, we don't feel the weightiness of the investment to acquire that level of knowledge.